Welcome to the webinar for the project Naloxone Champions. My name is Marty Otañez. I'm the project leader, and I'm also chair and an associate professor in the Anthropology Department at the University of Colorado, Denver. First of all, I want to thank the CDPHE and CDC for the Overdose Data to Action Grant, which is the funds that were provided for this project. I also want to thank harm reduction workers, public health advocates in Denver, Pueblo, Alamosa, Grand Junction, Glenwood Springs, and Fort Collins. These are the different participating places in this project. I also want to mention I have a team of 4 CU Denver students with expertise in video editing that have been part of this project. I couldn't have done this without their labor and careful editing, so I'm grateful for them. So the presentation is in a couple parts. It'll be about 45 minutes, maybe close to an hour, and it's going to be comprised of project details, showing of a couple videos to illustrate some key points, and pre-recorded presentations by my student assistants to show their perspective about the project and some of the details about working with individuals. So a little bit of background. I have never Narcaned anyone or experienced an overdose. And I'm saying this because when I got started, some people asked me, individuals who participate in the project asked me these questions, because I think for them, it's like you're either in this subcategory of individuals who have Narcan someone or experienced an overdose, or you're not. And obviously, if you're within that subgroup, then you have this like lived reality. So I'm just really enthusiastic, but also in my own family, on March 9th, 2016, my brother Andrew, he passed away due to an overdose where naloxone was used. And we suspect the cause of death was a mixture of cocaine and fentanyl. And so this experience in my family partly drives me to gather and share related stories. And I'm also familiar with drug culture through my ongoing research about occupational health issues among cannabis cultivation workers in Colorado and my recreational drug use as a young adult. So details about the project. The project serves to increase knowledge of the importance of naloxone in reducing the number of opioid overdoses in Colorado. So there is a project website, www.naloxonechampions.org. So there's more details there. And by the end of September 2021, there'll be links and tabs on that website where you can view the 80+ videos that were created in this project between June and August 2021. Now, through the creation of first-person videos, also called digital stories, the goal is to increase awareness of the importance and the role of naloxone in what I call the polysubstance overdose epidemic. And I say polysubstance rather than just opioids, because typically what I'm learning from individuals in the trenches that do this work every day, an individual who overdoses generally has multiple substances, not just heroin, but there could be multiple substances, for example, cannabis, methamphetamines, fentanyl, cocaine, alcohol, prescribed medication for mental health illnesses. So changing the opioid word to polysubstance helps think about the remedies to this epidemic and crisis that we're facing. The direct beneficiaries of this project are people of Colorado who will see these videos and increase their own awareness about this epidemic that's affecting our communities. The indirect beneficiaries of this project are those who use opioids, other drugs, and are at the risk of suffering an overdose. So what is a digital story? So a digital story typically is a 3-minute long video with audio narration, photographs, and video excerpts and background music. The main principle of this approach to collecting stories and sharing stories is creating space for people to share their stories so their voices are heard and that other people are not telling their stories for them. Typically, digital stories are not designed as public service announcements. That doesn't mean they can't be used if there's factual information in there to be used as public service announcements, but they're not necessarily designed to force a health message inside the pieces themselves. And facilitators, individuals who collect stories, we don't put words in people's mouths of participants. In these videos, if done well, oftentimes can pull at people's heartstrings and elicit an emotional response, which may thereby change people's perspectives, people's stigmas that they hold against people who use drugs, for example, which are the themes of this project. Now, in mid-July, 6 weeks before the end of this project, we realized that the 24-hour workshop model of creating digital stories wasn't working. We weren't able to collect or to sign up individuals to complete the workshop. And analyzing our problems, it could be everything from dissemination or recruitment strategies. It could also be that the individuals who mostly suffer from drug use or are prone to overdoses tend to be middle class and more affluent individuals. And the individuals that we focused on, because they were available to us through our contacts, were individuals who use drugs and who are unhoused. And so a larger project in the future would be how to capture the more traditional quote unquote overdose individual, a person who may be prone to overdoses and who has who consumes drugs, prescription drugs and illicit drugs. So that's a conversation for a later date, but I'd love to get people's feedback on how to get people who maybe perceive that they have more at stake if they share these stories, to get them to participate in these kinds of projects for knowledge purposes and overdose prevention. So we did schedule 5 in-person 24-hour workshops, but we had just one being filled. And that was even after using our professional networks, traditional media blasts, and paid advertisements in a weekly newspaper in Colorado. So what we did, my team and I responded by creating a hybrid workshop. Part 1 involved a recorded informal conversation where participants shared their stories related to an overdose and the use of Narcan and Naloxone, or the absence of Narcan and Naloxone during the overdose episode. Virtually all of the 80 plus stories were collected at syringe exchange programs where Narcan Naloxone were being distributed to people who use drugs. Anecdotally, I believe around 50% of the individuals that we recorded were what's called elevated or high. And that's just anecdotal information based on our interactions with them. And it raises points about ethics and also how to do this in a way that's appropriate and in a dignified manner. And I've had conversations with individuals who are on my advisory committee. I have about 6 people, knowledgeable expertise, folks with expertise in harm reduction. These individuals are on my committee to help me through the project. And one of them suggested that it might be good to, in the future, to look at individuals and only have them participate after they have done heroin or another drug, because that's when they're not dope sick. That's when they're able to function, quote unquote. And so there's different kinds of ways to approach these projects in the future to ensure that individuals who do participate are participating on their own terms. Now, we interacted with individuals after they picked up their clean supplies and Narcan Naloxone. Most of the stories were collected in parking lots or back alleys behind syringe exchange places to avoid noise from people in cars. About 10 of the 80 plus stories were videotaped, meaning individuals were okay with their faces being in the video, whereas virtually all others were audio recorded. And then my team and I asked several individuals for ideas for imagery and music for their video, but very few had any ideas, or they just said, we trust you and you go ahead and obtain images you think work with the story. And we used a fee-based service called Storyblocks to populate the videos and pull the stories visually forward. So my team of project assistants went through each file, about 20 minutes each, and stitched together a coherent narrative focused on project themes. Unsurprisingly, memory recall was an issue, and some of the stories were emotionally charged because of one or more near-death experiences. So there's a lot of self-reflection during the sharing of the stories. And if you think about it, if an individual does experience an overdose, many of the things that they might recall would be from other people that told them about the overdose who were there. And so that's just a caveat to think about these stories that were narrated to us. About 10 days after recording each individual stories, we shared web links to drafts of their videos, either by text or email, and arranged a time to talk on the phone or in person to solicit input from storytellers. So the goal was to get input from them before their stories went public. And because this population is difficult and hard to reach, we probably only achieved maybe, I would say 15 to 20% of this portion of the project, meaning 15 or 20 stories out of 80 had the individuals look at their video before they went public, even though we made a good faith effort to ensure that they could see the video and then arrange to talk to them and record them, providing us with feedback about their videos. The reoccurring themes in the stories were overdose memories, mostly bad ones, mental health issues, loneliness, steps to administer Narcan, and the importance of access to Narcan. Now, we are working on finalizing the videos, revisiting information that might not be factual, and then also putting resources at the end toward the credits to ensure people who watch these can look at the credits and find resources. Now, when I say the issue of factual information, there are a number of stories that were good, but didn't necessarily have the best information to report. So for example, at least 2 or 3 storytellers said during their overdose experience, an individual decided to shoot them up with methamphetamine with the idea that that kind of shot would, the adrenaline or whatever that comes from that would reverse the overdose. So that kind of information we want to correct. And so we'll have text on screen and resolve it that way. Another factual piece of information, which was a little bit gray that we had to clear up, is some people administered Narcan and said they waited about 10 minutes for the second dose. And so typically it's 2 to 3 minutes. And so these little things we're just going through to carefully ensure that we're not perpetuating misinformation with these stories. So videos will be free to the public to be used, available on our website, naloxonechampions.org, and they're for educational purposes, not for profit purposes. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to stop and I'm going to show 2 videos. One of them is by Lindsay in Fort Collins. It's about 3 minutes, 30 seconds. Another one is by Nate in Glenwood Springs, about 3 minutes or so. He's from Glenwood Springs. And I think these are good representative videos to demonstrate some of the things that individuals experience and have shared in these stories.
I was getting high with a friend, and we were both intravenous drug users. And, you know, as soon as I did a shot, I was like, I looked at my friend and I said, "Ooh, I'm glad I didn't do all of it," because I was testing it for someone else. I didn't even do a usable amount to get high on. I did 1/10 of that to test it. And it turned out it had fentanyl in it, and it killed me immediately. And Narcan saved my life. And it's not just that it saved my life, it's the fact that literally in the week following that, I administered Narcan, was it 12 times in 16 hours? It was a crazy situation. I was doing security for a bunch of escorts that were all using, and a bunch of heroin came from New Jersey down to North Carolina that was laced with fentanyl, and it took out 16 people I knew in less than 24 hours. Wow. And 12 of them I brought back with Narcan. It was crazy. It got to the point where I had to keep going back and asking for Narcan. And people were like, "What are you really doing with this? Like, are you really using it that often?" You know, and the police and EMTs were showing up at overdose scenes, and they were like, you know, "What the heck?" Because I was always there doing CPR and administering Narcan. And I've used it a bunch. And what it comes down to, you know, you look at it and it's like, okay, like, yes, it saves lives. Like, that's not disputable. Like, I'm sorry, I've seen it. I've administered it at least a dozen times, and that's just in that period. So probably like closer to 20 altogether. But so yeah, I've seen it, and I've never seen it not work. But at the same time, like for the naysayers, you know, like, "Oh, you're saving some junkie's life so they can keep fucking stealing from people so they can get high." Okay, but then you look at the cases like Kayla.
I was one of the biggest junkies in North Carolina.
The biggest junkie in North Carolina, strung out on the streets since she was 12 years old. And now she's clean and living out Oh, we were living in Vail, Colorado, like she was working in a 5-star restaurant, living a great life, 2 years clean. And she wouldn't have that opportunity had her life not been saved by Narcan.
So the most recent time that I've had to Narcan someone, I think it was maybe like 6 months ago. I was at a hotel with my friend and her boyfriend. He was one of those guys that like just kept doing more and more and more even when he didn't need more. And we had said something to him and he didn't respond, and we looked over and he was blue in the face, not breathing. I was looking for my Narcan, and Stephanie was screaming, and I quit looking for my Narcan, told Stephanie she needed to find it, and I started doing CPR on him, and then she finally found it, and I hit him once and got nothing, so I waited I felt like I waited forever. It was probably only a couple of minutes though, and Stephanie found another one, so I hit him again. He still wasn't doing anything, and I was told Stephanie, I'm like, we're gonna have to call 911, like, if he doesn't come to, like, in the next, 30 seconds, like, or else he's gonna die, so she found one more, and I hit him one more time, and he, gasped for air, and I didn't think that he was gonna come back, with how many times that we had to hit him. It's scary being around someone who's, dead or dying, and you can't do anything, having to wait for paramedics to get there, it's, excruciating. It's the worst thing to ever experience, so. I love having Narcan because I've been in situations where I didn't have it, and it's, the worst feeling. It was in a hotel room with a lot of people that I didn't know, and I didn't even know the kid that overdosed. But everyone started freaking out and was just trying to leave the hotel room and was just gonna leave him. That day, if I wouldn't have been there, they were just gonna leave him. So, I don't know, some people are just messed up. I think that the people that should have access to Narcan is everybody. Whether you're a user or not, I think everyone should. Because you don't know what kind of situation you're gonna walk into or be around and need it.
All right, thank you for watching those. I think it's important to emphasize that those are representative videos that have different themes, everything from access to Narcan, naloxone, individuals who at a moment of crisis potentially were going to walk away and leave someone to die from an overdose, but they chose to stay, and then also the importance of having hope and allowing people who maybe are in their deepest depths of difficulties with their use of drugs actually can turn life around, which you saw in Nate's video. And so the next portion of this presentation what I want to do is show 3 student presentations, and these are brief, 5 minutes, and they're showing the perspective of the individuals on my team who helped edit the videos. And I think it's important to allow these individuals to speak, because I did primarily most of the conversations and actual interviewing with 80 plus individuals, and these participants, or sorry, these student assistants were either with me or they received all the edits, all the original footage, and then edit it. And so they have a closeness to this media that I thought would be interesting to learn about. So let me cue up one of those, and we'll start with you, Sarah. And I hope you enjoy this.
I want to begin off by talking about the power of the editor. At the end of all of this, out of all of work, most people are going to see the 2 to 3 minute videos that we have created or the storytellers themselves have created. But they don't see the 10-minute video or the 1 hour long interview that we have conducted, which has a lot more information, a lot more detail on how to reverse an overdose, how to exactly what was happening, what they were hearing, what they were seeing, and what they're doing now in their lives. So all this information that is tied to these interviews that we conducted, we have to take that information, that amount of time, and compress it into a 2 to 3 minute video. And as you can imagine, that's very overwhelming and very stressful, but it's not impossible to do. So in order to do that, we most of the time have to pick and choose what information is going to be presented about the storyteller, what parts of the storyteller's story are audience and other people going to take away from this person. What I do first is I have a little criteria, a little list. If the interview is long and it's hard to cut down, is first, what are the main points of the story? What is the main gist and main theme of the story? And that's what I grab. And then I see what details need to be kept and what details are not necessary, what details don't really add a lot to the story that people can do without. But again, there is a lot more information and a lot more to these stories than what you guys see or what people have been seeing at our screenings. And editing, some people might think you're just getting a computer, throw some audio together and put a clip over it. But there is a lot more going on when it comes to digital storytelling, specifically when it comes to creating videos. And it all starts with first cutting down, getting your story. Once you get that 2 to 3 minute long audio, sometimes you want an extra minute, so a 4 minute audio, because it's that story there's sometimes it's just that hard to cut down that amount of information. So once you have your story, then you are, in a sense, a painter, you are a crafter, you're an artist. And with that, you have to find perfect music, not just any random sad music to just pop in there. You have to find music that fits the character of the person telling the story and that fits the nature and the tone of the story itself. It's a lot of thought, and it could take you even up to an hour just to find the right music that fits your video. And then also finding the visuals. Sometimes you have this idea in your head and it just seems so right, and you want to recreate this idea of this story so other people can see the story the way that you've seen it, see the story the way the storyteller has seen it. But we don't have access to those visuals. We don't have access to that idea. We don't have access to this imagination, this picture we have created, and we have to get creative with it and try our best to repaint this picture that we see in our head. And sometimes it's very difficult, especially when you're working with limited sources. Not a lot of the storytellers provided family pictures or friends photos. And also it depends on your skill level. If you're able to do more things using your skills, using your editing skills, because editing, if you have more skill in animation, if you have skill in, if you're a drawer, you could have also drew something that represents what you saw in the story and have that part of your whole video. So there's many aspects to it. So at the end of the day, even though the storyteller tells this amazing, beautiful story, the editor gets to choose and shape and form that story. They get to pick and choose what gets to stay in the story. They get to choose what information is left out. They get to choose all these different factors, how the story is being portrayed, how what the tone of the story is. All of that is up to the editor.
Great, that was Yusura, and I'm going to go now to Madison. He was another individual who's on my team. And Madison, like Yusura and the two other participants, probably each edited, I would say, about 20 videos for this project. So here's Madison.
My name is Madison Bounds. I am a recent graduate of the University of Colorado, Denver, where I studied media, filmmaking, and cultural studies. During this project, I served as a project assistant and a video editor, where I edited 28 digital stories over the course of the summer. I have a very personal connection to both the project and its subject because I lost my uncle to opioids and have seen directly how that affects the lives around him. I usually like to start by searching through the audio transcript from the interview. This will help you where to begin. I usually focus in on specific keywords central to the story, such as overdose, Narcan, opioids, emergency, and so forth. Once you've located the central story, which in this project is an overdose experience or using naloxone, then begin to search for additional details to help the story and the characters, such as their name, their age, location of the overdose, emotions at the time, how they feel about it now, and so forth. In the first edit of the draft, include anything and everything you think might work and intentionally make it longer than the ideal length of the final video. Once all information is collected and you can see the length of the rough draft, begin to remove all unnecessary information, details that do not help tell the specific story, shape the character, or affect any of the political or thematic material. Remove from the edit. Common things to remove: too much personal information. For example, if the subject talks about where they're born and raised, that does not affect a story about Colorado opioid usage or naloxone. Or details that could paint the subject in an inappropriate, unjustified, or inaccurate way. It is critical to portray the subject true as to how they interviewed and in a way that sticks to the themes of the project. For example, do not include the subject discussing how their teenage marijuana use could be led to their heroin addiction, because that does not apply to opioid overdoses and naloxone use in Colorado. Next is selection videos and imagery. Think both critically and symbolically and literally about your selection. Thinking either too literally or too symbolically can make the video feel flat and boring. For example, if the storyteller is discussing opioid use or going to the ER after an overdose, then select a video or image of opioids or of the ER. But if they are discussing feeling isolated or lost, then use more symbolic imagery to further communicate that feeling. It's also to remember, if possible, use imagery or video from the subject themselves instead of using stock footage. And lastly, selecting the music. Make sure the music is not too loud or abrasive or distracting from the story. If you choose to use music throughout the narration, make sure the music is not too loud or overrides the audio for narration. The music should be thought of the icing on the cake and not a central part of the digital story. Knowing the key points and moments you need for the edit to be able to tell a full, cohesive story is central to this process. For example, making sure that the subject always clarifies the context of what they are discussing, whether it be a story, a personal antidote, a naloxone experience, and so forth. For example, during my overdose, the paramedics administered naloxone and it saved me, not they administered naloxone or I reversed an overdose in the park. Making sure the specific details of who's doing what and where it's located are very critical. This often requires reminding the subject to reiterate the context of the events and the story. Secondly, focusing on personal, intimate details to aid the emotional impact of the story is also central. The more the audience can relate to an experience of the storyteller, the more impactful the video will be. Clarify with others involved the themes and the necessary information that will be needed in the video edit. An overdose story or reversal, naloxone use, why we need it, and so on. However, do not be too rigid with the interview questions, and make sure to have the subject go off on potential tangents, which are often great, authentic sound bites that occurred during these natural, off-the-cusp moments. And lastly, do not cut the interviewer off and wait a few seconds once they are finished speaking, as this helps the editor work in post-production. When conducting an interview in an honest and ethical way, honesty is the key. But you need to make sure how to tell someone's story that is both honest and accurate to who and how they are, how they want to be depicted while also staying focused on the political themes and ideas of the project. Be honest with the storyteller about what you are trying to do and tell them upfront about the goals and themes of the project and why we want their story included. For example, in this project, we were not after grandiose, exploitative, dramatic, drug-related stories, but we were after specific overdose-related experiences and how naloxone was administered. By doing this, the storyteller knows what you are trying to get from their story and therefore to achieve with the project. And therefore, by your relationship with the storyteller does not have to be manipulative and non-ethical.
Now we're going to turn to John's presentation, but before I do, I'm going to run a video that is going to be the basis of his presentation.
So my name is Alexandria. I am 28 years old, and I have a son who is 8. I enjoy doing creative things like painting and drawing, anything I can create with my hands I'm good at. I also enjoy like helping people. I enjoy being able to comfort somebody when they need somebody to talk to or whatever. I'm normally that person that people come to. I was home alone. I'm an IV user, so I was doing a shot in my bathroom. Didn't think about they had upped my methadone dose that day, so I took too much heroin. With methadone also being an opiate, I didn't think about that. I was really naive, and I had done probably about two points of a gram, and I ended up passing out like in my bathroom. One of my good friends, he was having trouble at home, and so I'd leave my window unlocked and he'd climb through if he needed a place to go if I wasn't home. Well, the window was unlocked and he luckily climbed through and he found me in the bathroom, and we didn't have Narcan at the time, so he just tried, reviving me, and he put me in the shower and put cold water on me. One thing that he did do too was he gave me a shot of methamphetamine, which was almost like, kind of like adrenaline almost like, and I just woke up to him slapping me in the face like, wake up, and my limbs were really heavy, and even like my eyelids were just extremely heavy. It was hard for me to keep them like open and just to stay alert. If Narcan was available, I think it would have been a lot less scary for both of us, Would have just been reassuring to know like, hey, this is a drug that helps, prevent me from dying basically. And I feel like now it's nice that there are places that educate people on that and let you know that it's not scary. You don't have to be afraid if that happens to call 911 and call an ambulance. That would save your life. The needle exchange here has helped me with my recovery. I've been through some pretty traumatic stuff in the past couple years, and it's been kind of hard for me to get sober, and I don't have a lot of support system, but the people that work here have been really awesome. I had a stranger telling me that they were proud of me, but that felt so good to even have them, notice that it is an accomplishment. Like, even if I just showed up to, my appointment. I'm the type of person that I don't regret anything. Like, everything happens for a reason, I think, and that definitely happened to me for a reason to, you respect your life a lot, but like in a different way after something like that happens.
Hi, everybody. My name is John Wroblewski. I am a first-year graduate student in the anthropology program at UC Denver, studying medical anthropology. I wanted to take a few minutes to take the opportunity to talk about one story that I worked on that I personally found very interesting, and that I thought presented a good opportunity to make a few points about this project. I did not personally interview her in Alamosa for this experience, but I did edit her story. So I took that 20 to 40 minute interview that we had and squashed it down to the 3-ish minutes that you just saw. So first, a few of the limitations we had in regards to selecting imagery. We selected all of our photo and video, or for the most part, from a stock image and video website called storyblocks.com. Which means that for all of our videos, we were choosing from the same repository of images. A few problems that are associated with, having 80+ videos with images sourced from the same website is potentially you're going to use some of the same images, which isn't a major issue. But when you're sitting down at a screening and watching 10 to 20 digital stories back to back, it can be a little awkward to see the same video clip used multiple times. And that's contrasted with some of our storytellers did provide us with personal photos or videos that made their own stories perhaps more compelling than if they had used stock imagery from Storyblocks. One of the other issues with Storyblocks is some of the images on there, especially those that depict drug use or those depicting people experiencing homelessness, can be stigmatizing or reinforce negative stereotypes. So it's not actually productive to include those images anyways. Sometimes there's the inability to follow up with the person who told us the story, make sure that they're satisfied with the story that's being put out. But sometimes we can't get a hold of them. So we met this individual at a syringe exchange in Alamosa. We got their contact information. We told them the day that we would likely next be back at the syringe exchange in Alamosa. And through efforts to contact them through their phone number or email, and when arriving in Alamosa again, we were not able to get in touch with them. The opening video I used was this one of a person painting on a large canvas. But you can see on the left-hand side of the screen is the original video, and on the right-hand side of the screen is the video after it was edited. So clearly I zoomed in on it. So in my personal opinion, if the audience in the first 20 seconds of the story hears a female narrator's voice, or a voice which they assume to be female, and sees a person with a beard on the screen, that could possibly create some confusion as to who's telling this story and who this story is about. Moving on from imagery, there were some issues we had to approach regarding the actual subject matter of what the storyteller shared with us. So the main thing was across 80 stories is the conflicting information that exists about what you do when somebody overdoses, when Narcan is and when Narcan is not available. So in this particular example, this participant claims that a shot of meth is what reversed their overdose. And, as people who aren't, medical professionals, we cannot necessarily speak to, whether or not that would potentially be effective, but we don't have to be medical professionals to know that we cannot advocate for anybody to take meth to reverse an opioid overdose. So even though it's inaccurate information, I felt it was important to include in the story, or I shouldn't say inaccurate information, but potentially not board approved information. Provides us, it paints a picture of drug use and what's going on in the drug scene in Alamosa and what people are doing, because it's important to know. But it also provides us as the administrators of the project to use that information as kind of a launching pad to talk about larger issues of either misinformation as it deals with drug overdose, and just as a platform to give more accurate instructions as to what somebody maybe should do if they don't have Narcan available. One of the other problems was that some people did not necessarily properly qualify for the project, but they were recruited anyways. Right. In this case, right, the name of the project is called Naloxone Champions, and Naloxone or Narcan was obviously not involved in the story. So one of the solutions to that would just be a more thorough screening process. And before we actually go into an interview where we begin recording somebody and taking their information, we confirm 100% what the experience they went through was. So between that and other content, potentially providing us an opportunity to educate people, it is so important to figure out how to sensitively cut down that 30 to 40 minutes into a 2 to 3 minute video. Because these are these people's lives, and we want to make sure that we represent them accurately, sensitively, in a way that they're comfortable with, in a way that does not perpetuate the stigma that we're trying to end with this project. Thank you, everybody, for your time. Thank you for watching and taking the time to learn more about the subject.
All right, so you just watched two videos, John's and Yusura's, and they're meant to provide a little more insight into the process. Now, one of the things we did find, one of the gaps, was that there was still uncertainty among audience members when we screen these. We've had 6 screenings, or I should say 5 so far. The 6th one is tonight, which is the 31st of August, 2021 in Grand Junction. And today is International Overdose Awareness Day. So this is our last screening. We've had screenings in Pueblo, Alamosa, Denver, Glenwood Springs, and then later we might do in Fort Collins. I'm just trying to pin down a venue. But one of the things that kept coming up is this idea of what do you do when there's an overdose? So one video that's part of this project is by Maggie in Glenwood Springs that clarifies this issue. And this is designed as sort of a PSA, but it's meant to augment the videos that we have here in this collection. So let me run this video. It's only 1 minute and a couple seconds.
So when I come across an overdose, the first thing I do is call 911. If there's something wrong with somebody and you're not sure what it is, always just call 911. You can call 911 and put it on speakerphone, or ask a friend to call 911 if you have someone else with you. Then once I have 911 on speakerphone, I start checking the person's vitals, checking for responsiveness. Once I have determined that the person is in fact unresponsive and I'm ready to administer Narcan, I again ensure that they're lying flat on their back, tilt their head back slightly, pull out my trusty Narcan, insert it into their nose, and plunge. And then I turn them gently onto their side into the recovery position and give them some space for about 2 to 3 minutes. If they still have not revived after that time, I turn them flat on their back and administer a second dose of Narcan into their other nostril. Alternatively, I have identified this person as unresponsive. I get my injectable naloxone out and inject it into the top of their thigh, the side of their arm, or their butt through their clothes is totally fine. And then I just hang out with the person until EMS comes there. I can provide CPR in between Narcan doses if I feel comfortable with that, and I can keep administering Narcan or naloxone every 2 to 3 minutes until EMS arrives.
Now, besides information that seemed to be missing among audience members in the screenings of the videos produced in the project, there's also a question that came up in the Denver screening on the 27th of August, 2021, where there was uncertainty about what do you do if you come across a person who is experiencing an overdose. So me and my team members are in the process of making a short video like the one you just saw with Maggie to just give people insight into what to do if you come across someone who's experiencing an overdose that when a Narcan and naloxone is not available. And again, that'll be about a 1 to 2 minute video. So now to sort of wrap up, what I want to do is just emphasize that today is International Overdose Awareness Day, and the project launched a survey to obtain people's views after watching one video that was produced in the project, and then answering a couple of questions about Narcan, naloxone, questions about stigma, and other things related to project themes. So what I want to do is share with you the survey just so you can quickly look at it, but then also show you the video that was used in the survey. And so the actual final report, which will be available likely by the end of September on the website naloxonechampions.org will be findings from this survey that's being administered overall to about 200 people in Colorado. So let me just set that up for you to ensure people can look at this properly. And now I'm going to share screen. And the goal is to just show you the survey. And I'm happy to send the link. I'll make the link available for people if they're interested. So basically, this is a Qualtrics survey, and you have the main text in the center of the screen. On the right is just a tool to see how it looks visually. So there's the boilerplate text that describes it. Individuals get a $50 King Soopers gift card. The survey ends tonight, which is 11:59 p.m. Tuesday, August 31st, 2021. And people have two options. And the first one is I choose to be in the project, or I choose not to be in the project. If you select choose, then you go to the next screen. And then there's a video. So what I want to do is watch the video now, just so you can see the video that was integrated into this survey. And then in the future, the data which is generated by individuals who watch the video and then complete the survey will show people's perceptions about the video as a tool to destigmatize people who use drugs, but also to determine their awareness about naloxone and Narcan and the value of it. So let me go to, actually, yeah, this is just page 3 of the survey, basic demographic information. And there's about 23 questions. It takes about 15 minutes or so to complete. So let me run Ashley's video, and this will be the way to end the presentation. We'll come back and I will briefly provide 1 or 2 more details about the project, but this is just to demonstrate the video that was integrated into the online survey for the project.
I was at my sister's house down in Center, and I was the one that had the overdose. All I remember is doing my shot, and then next thing I knew, the EMTs were around me and they were ready to, they hooked me up to a machine to shock me. And because I woke up, it said no shock needed, but I still had to go to the hospital to get checked out and make sure everything was okay. I used heroin and I cooked it, melted it down on a spoon. At that time, there was a lot of heroin that had fentanyl in it, and so a dot between me and my sister. Okay, a dot is, it weighs 0.1, and back then it used to go for $20. Now they go for $10. I had overdosed because I had just gotten out of jail that day, and I had been in there for almost 2 months. When you get out of jail and you think that you could do the same amount you did before you went to jail, you can't, because you'll overdose. I've seen people that gotten out of jail and they would smoke and they would overdose. When I woke up, all I remember seeing is the EMTs and my shirt cut, and I was hooked up to a machine, and I was just looking everywhere for my sister, and she was crying, and she was like, I'm sorry, because she had tried to bring me back. She threw me in a cold shower, and she said that I wasn't coming to it and my pulse was fading. So the next thing she did, she called the ambulance, because at that time we hadn't heard of a Narcan. I know what Narcan is now. Like when someone's going into an overdose, you spray it in one nostril and give it anywhere from 3 to 10 minutes, and if it don't work, then you use another one and you spray it in the other nostril. And you rub their chest with your knuckles in the middle of their chest bone, and it should help their heart to start pumping again.
All right, you just watched Ashley's video from Alamosa, and that was the video integrated into an online survey that's being administered today, which is August 31st, 2021, International Overdose Awareness Day. The survey ends tonight at 11:59 p.m., and the results will be in the final report. And then to wrap up, I guess just two main points. The first one is it's been a pleasure to work with so many people who were willing to share their stories. And I feel blessed that individuals took time to open up, be vulnerable, and to a certain degree, experience these difficult memories with total strangers. And so I made a good faith effort with my team members to package them in a dignified way that is not stigmatizing. My team and I and members of the advisory council will review all of them and make sure there's the appropriate text on screen that deals with any factually incorrect information, and also provides new information for resources for individuals who watch the videos. The key thing that we want to do is ensure that policymakers, legislators get a chance to view these, and then potentially the success of this project will be to influence the landscape on which decisions about greater access to Narcan and Naloxone in Colorado are made. And ultimately, we hope to, through the project, destigmatize people who use drugs and ensure that we can reduce the unnecessary deaths due to overdose. So I'm going to end here. Thank you again. I want to thank the CDPHE and CDC, and also members of the Advisory Council, and of course, people who watched this webinar. And contact me anytime at Marty.Otanez at ucdenver.edu, and check out the project website, www.naloxonechampions.org. That's it, and have a great day, and thanks for your time and attention.